Now, this is a story from Japan, and some people say that it's true, but it's for you to decide. Once, there was a farmer who had many, many children. And the oldest children, well, they were working on the farm with him because it was hard work being a farmer. But the youngest son of the family was not a good farmer. If you put him in a field to try and plant things, he would find a stick and draw in the dirt. If you put him to harvesting things, he would take the grains of rice and make pictures out of them. He was no use on a farm. And so the father finally said, "Son, I think you need to go to the temple and learn how to be a priest so they can teach you to write and draw and read and do things. You're not going to be a farmer." Well, the boy was very unhappy to be sent away, but he liked the idea of reading and writing and drawing a lot. So he went off and with his father went to the priest at the temple. And the priest said, "We will teach your son everything that he needs to know in order to be a priest." And so he learned. He learned how to read from the text they had. He learned how to write with the brushes they used to write. And he learned how to draw even better. And he drew, and he drew, and he drew, even when he was supposed to be learning how to read and write. Oh, he learned those things, but oh, how he wanted to draw. And the thing that he loved drawing most of all was cats. He could draw a cat in any pose, and it would look alive. He could draw a cat jumping. He could draw a cat playing with string. He could draw a cat sitting. He could draw a cat sleeping. And the cat would look so real and so beautiful. But he wasn't getting any of his other studying done, and he wasn't getting any of the work done around the temple. And the priests were beginning to notice this. And finally, one day, the head priest came to him and said, "My boy, you are not learning. You are only drawing cats. I'm afraid you must leave and do something else. Maybe drawing cats is what you were meant to do, but that does not mean you will be a good priest. So, take your belongings and leave. And I have one piece of advice for you. When you go to sleep, look for small places, not big ones." Well, that was a strange piece of advice, but the boy didn't know what to do, and he was very sad because he'd been kicked out of the family farm, and now he'd been kicked out of the temple. But drawing cats was so good and so much fun, and he could make such pretty things when he was drawing, no matter what he was drawing. He thought, "I know, there's another temple in the next town. Maybe they'll need somebody like me." And he started walking to the next town. Well, it was quite some distance, and he didn't know that there was something wrong at that temple. All the priests had left that temple because there was a monster in the temple. It was a big, hairy goblin thing that was scaring everyone. And if you were silly enough to stay there in the temple, you didn't come back out the next morning. And people said the goblin was eating travelers. Well, the boy didn't know that, but he went to the next town, and it was late in the evening when he got there, and the townspeople were already in their homes asleep. But he saw a candle in the window of the temple, and so he went there. And he walked up to the temple, and he knocked at the door, and no one answered. He pushed the door, and it opened. And the only light in the temple was the one candle. And he thought to himself, "That's very strange. I wonder where the priests are. Maybe they're already asleep and they forgot to blow out the candle. I know. I'll make a surprise for them so that they'll want to meet me in the morning." And he found a piece of screening that was there that didn't have any decorations on it. and he found where they kept their ink and their brushes, and he began to draw cats. Oh, he drew such beautiful cats, some of his finest work, and he covered that screen with pictures of cats. And then he thought to himself, I'm really tired. I should find a place to sleep. But the priest said, not in a big place. I have to find someplace small. Now, he was not a very large boy himself, and he looked around and he found a big cabinet with a door that opened. And he thought to himself, that's big enough for me to sleep. I can go in there. And he went into the cabinet and closed the door, and he fell asleep. But later in that night, very late in the night, he heard a sound, something like scritch, scritch, scritch. Sound like something of claws going across the floor. And then there was another sound, a sound kind of like yow, and more sounds and hisses and snarls and the sound of fighting. Well, definitely he wasn't coming out of the cupboard now. He held onto the door to keep it shut. And after a long time of noises, everything fell silent. Well, he stayed in that cupboard until he thought it might be morning. And in the morning, he opened the door of the cabinet, and there, in the middle of the floor of the temple, he saw something terrible. It was big and hairy, and it had claws, and it looked like what you would see if you had a rat the size of a cow. And it had been clawed and scratched and bitten and wasn't moving. Well, he thought, this must be what was making noise last night, but what was it fighting? And he still didn't see any priests in the temple. But as he looked around, he saw the screen where he had painted cats. Now, he had painted them all with fine black ink, the kind that you use for making writing and paintings. But he noticed that on his drawings, the teeth of the cats and their claws were now red, as if they had bitten and scratched something with blood. And he thought, oh, this is just too strange. I have to leave this place and go out. And he packed up his things and ran out of the front door of the temple, only to run into a priest. And the priest said, did you just go into the temple and get scared? I'm just coming up myself. We can't stay there in the nighttime, because of the monster. And the boy said, do you mean a big hairy thing that looks like a giant rat the size of a cow? And the priest said, yes, did you see it? It's in there dead, I think. Well, the priest was very surprised to hear that, and he went into the temple, and there was the monster. What killed it? I made some drawings of cats, and I think they fought it in the night. Well, the priest was very surprised and wanted to hear the boy's story, and the boy showed him the paintings, and the boy said, I'm sorry, I didn't know that, there was a monster here. And the priest said, no, getting rid of the monster was very important. Thank you so much. We owe you so much. And the boy said, could I stay here and learn from you? And the priest said, of course, you can stay here. You've saved our temple. And so it was that the boy stayed with the priests. And even though he did not become a priest himself, he continued to work on his artwork. In fact, he became an artist who's still known in Japan today. They called him Seshutoyo, and he painted many, many things over the years. But what he was best known for were his paintings of cats. And that is the story, The Boy Who Drew Cats.